肉で宴をやるけど。
Brace 50,000.
Wow. Hey, much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Hey, thanks for tuning in once again. Appreciate you guys taking the time to do that, especially if you're here in the live premiere. Thank you for being here right now. We're gonna go ahead and just get back into the research here on giants in North America. So many archaeological discoveries reported all over North America. And we're just gonna continue, go ahead and finish on a book we've been reading. So I appreciate you guys being here right now. We're gonna get started right away. All right, hold on guys, 1 second. All right, so this is, let me see. This is the book right here we're gonna get into again. It's the Encyclopedia of Ancient Giants in North America. All right. And this is by Fritz Zimmerman, forward by L.A. Marzulli. Let me know if the music at any point is too loud. I'll go ahead and put it down. Just let me know. All right, again, we're going to continue where we left off in this book. All right, I got a whole playlist called Giants of Ancient America, or Giants of America. Just go ahead and check out the previous parts if you haven't. All right. And where we left off in this book, actually, let me just fix it. There we go. It was talking about Indiana. So we're still in the Indiana part of this book. And we're going to begin here where it says LaPorte County. History of Just 100 Years, Volume 1, 1938. LaPorte County, Indiana. Near the junction of the Kankakee with the Little Kankakee on the farm of William Flanagan, directly under the apse of the principal mound on a plain about 1 to 1.5 feet, was found 3 skeletons in a semi-reclining position and facing northeasterly. The central one was that of a man, fully matured, of much more than the ordinary Anglo-Saxon size and proportions of the present day, as his right was one that was markedly feminine, much smaller and younger, and at the left one scarcely describable, but from the bone outlines and their structure also young and not as large as the central figure. All right. Right under it is have from the Ottawa Free Trader from Ottawa, Illinois, June 2nd, 1888. Another report here. Says while workmen were engaged in digging for sand at Van Meter's Bend near Kankakee Saturday, they unearthed the bodies of 6 men that are supposed to be those of an extinct race of giants. The bones are much larger than those of present day. The mound has produced a large number of skeletons and many interesting relics. Continuing, says here in Lawrence County, from the 5th annual report of the Geological Survey of Indiana, 1873, geology of Lawrence County, Indiana, at the site of the former county seat in Palestine, there was a vaulted tomb containing skeletons of persons not less than 6.5 feet, hammered copper earrings, and a globular war whistle were also found. You guys hear that? And continuing, says Indiana Progress, November 9th, 1921. Huge skeleton unearthed. Indiana produces bones of man believed to have been mound builders. Indianapolis, Indiana. The complete skeleton of one of Indiana's oldest inhabitants, said by Dr. W.N. Logan, state geologist, to be that of a mound builder, was, sorry, I got lost my place here, has been placed in the State Museum. The skeleton is more than 6 feet in height, was found by T.C. Hayston of Bloomington and Dick Gornsey of Bedford in excavating a prehistoric mound near the East Fork of the White River in Lawrence County. Dr. Logan says the time when the mound builders inhabited Indiana cannot be determined as to years, but it was a long period before the Indians is certain, so-called Indians. The mound from which the body was taken was in the form of a square with a vault system constructed of slabs of limestone. The skeleton was lying as buried with all the parts intact and in position with the exception of some of the more fragile parts. All right. Continuing, Madison County. Photo of the interior ditch and outer serpentine embankment of the Sun Temple at Mound State Park in Anderson, Indiana. The ditch holds water after heavy rains and was likely filled with water when originally constructed around 200 BC. And that's from his other book. It says here from the Plymouth Weekly Democrat, Plymouth, Indiana, November 7th, 1867, all the way from 1867. A malignant type of flukes is prevailing in Vigo County. Valparaiso has 3 prosperous seminaries of learning. A Lafayette individual named Dooley has been fined $75 for mayhem. The skeleton of an Indian giant was reported discovered near Anderson. An Indian giant, huh? And right here we have earthworks near Anderson, Madison County, Indiana. This image right here, as you guys can see, showing the White River. Concentric circle mounds or trenches. And we learned in another book, how they measured, the proportions and the exact math and the alignments to celestial things. It says here in Lima Daily News, Lima, Ohio, July 27, 1892, made by the Mounds, Congress to purchase prehistoric works. Anderson, Indiana. A camera cannot do the Indiana Mounds justice. They are not great heaps of earth which show well in a photograph, as is the case with those in Ohio and along the Mississippi, and are not even as attractive as those in Illinois and the Northwest, which follow the contour of snakes and wild beasts, but they possess outlines well defined, and precise scientists are convinced that their builders possess many of the talents of the ancients of Egypt and Asia. Like the other mounds, they are covered with forests, which show that ages have passed since the builders occupied them. The precision of the modern surveyor and the methods of the 19th century builder have been combined in the Indian mounds, and the result is a work of art rather than a crude heap. If it was known that the builders had surveyed Saturn through telescopic lens and beheld the circles around the inner globe, it might be claimed that they had used the planet and its girdle as their pattern for the construction of earthworks. The 5 great mounds lie just east of the city. The outer circle of the greatest of the 5 is but 10 feet in height, but broad enough to allow teams to pass over its crest. It is 150 feet in diameter, and measured from any point, it is identically the same distance from the center of the mound. The precision of these outer ridges is so nice, they at once attract attention. With a graceful curve, the ridge slopes of an angle of about 120 degrees to a great ditch 15 feet wide and about 15 feet deep. Like the ridge, it is perfect circle. From the ditch rises the great mound. The rise is rounded and evened off as prettily as though it had just been completed. In the very center of this mound, which is fully 100 feet across, is a prominence, and this is 5 feet above the outer circle ridge and 20 feet higher than the inner ditch. From this path wide enough for teams to pass runs to the outer ridge, where there is an opening. It bridges the ditch. All mounds, large and small, are built identically this pattern. All of the openings begin the north and on the direct line from the center mound to the North Star. These openings have been much studied, but significance of their direction has not been determined. The recent discoveries given later all tend to believe that all these mounds are buried deep under the present surface and were built on the strata of a shale, probably before the alluvial deposits were made. The great mounds of the Indian group all belong to the Bronnenberg family, which is among the wealthiest and best known in the county. The Bronnenbergs, while enterprising farmers, have little idea of the assistance they might give to science by allowing excavation in the mounds. They have persistently refused to allow any excavations made in any of the mounds, but recently a midnight party was organized which dug in the center of the center mound. Although the man went down 20 feet and found nothing but loose alluvial soil that had evidently not been used in the construction of the mounds, but had accumulated later, this strengthens the theory that the real works of primitive art lie far below the present surface of the ground and are built upon the underlying strata of slate. Dora Biddle of Anderson, a collector of antiques, has a skull, and another is on exhibition here, which has been severed just above the ears in such a manner as to remove the crown of the head and lay the brain bare. These skulls were found with others under conditions which would indicate that they were those of the mound builders. They are very large, show marked intellectually, and unlike skulls of the present day, or of the Indians, have a fifth skull bone in the back of the head. Continues, says here, Daily News from Goshen, Indiana, Saturday, November 26, 1892. Giant skeletons found. Anderson, Indiana, November 36. John Beal, a farmer living in the north part of the county, found some giant human skeletons while digging a hole in his field Friday. There were half a dozen skulls of gigantic size. The skeletons were those of men who in their lifetime must have been at least 9 feet in height. You guys hear that? 9 feet in height. Just picture that. A 9-footer. A man who's 9 feet high. And right here we got a rare photo of the cave located at the bottom of the bluffs at Mound State Park. Though partially caved in, early explorers believed the cave extended upward to the earthworks at the top of the bluff. Says here, New York Times, November 18th, 1895. Skeleton of Aborigines in a cave. Discovery made by workmen excavating in Indiana, Anderson, Indiana, November 17th. While making excavation last evening, workmen opened a cave in the west part of the city. It proved to be the tomb of 12 Aborigines. The 12 skeletons were propped in a sitting position, with their faces towards the wall. The bones indicated a race of men larger than the Indians of the present. The cave is near the famous Indian mounds. Bluffton, Indiana Chronicle, August 22nd, 1903. Found skeletons 8 feet tall. While excavating in a gravel pit at Anderson, Indiana, workmen unearthed half a dozen skeletons, most of which were 8 feet tall and over. 8 feet tall and over. One in particular was that of a man of a giant stature, and all were far above the height of tall persons. 2 of the skeletons were those of women. In the graves were found pieces of pottery, such as being unknown by the Indians, which leads to the conclusion that the bones are those of people of a prehistoric race. 2 bodies were found close to an ancient mound. Continuing, says the Crawfordsville Review, Crawfordsville, Indiana, June 15, 1920. A gravel pit, workers find skeletons near Anderson. Anderson, Indiana, June 19. Frank Jackson, foreman of a gravel pit gang on the William Bowman farm at the east edge of Anderson, while excavating today, unearthed the skeletons of a man, child, and dog, believed to be the remains of a prehistoric race, probably Indians or mound builders. The three skeletons were buried together in a structure of earth resembling a mound. Early residents of the city say the spot where the bones were found was once the site of an Indian village. The skeleton of the man indicated he was exceptionally large in stature. Exceptionally large. The bones were distributed over the entire city today by curiosity seekers who visited the gravel pit to see the skeletons. Continue in Monroe County, Indiana. Greenfield Daily Reporter, Greenfield, Indiana, December 26, 1912, found bones in cave. While exploring a cave near Bloomington yesterday, a party of young men found the skeleton of a large man in one of the rooms of the cave. The bones are thought to be those of a prehistoric man. In one of the rooms of the cave were found fingerprints on the wall and the name John Byers, 1870. The owner of the land did not know the cave existed. Montgomery County, the Ohio Democrat, November 24, 1892. Burial place of giants, skeletons of an ancient race unearthed in Indiana, traditions brought out by the discovery, evidence of a very large Americans. A rich archaeological find was recently unearthed 2 miles west of Crawfordsville in a gravel pit along the high bluffs of Sugar Creek. Thus far, 25 skeletons of Brobdingnagian stature have been exhumed, and the unburying of these mammoth bones is still going on. This necropolis of long ago is filled with excited hunters of curious and scientific students from Wabash College almost continually, and as soon as removed from the gravel, their rattling bones carried away to become parts of departments of archaeology, which are being established all over the city, right? That's when the Smithsonian gets a hold of them, right? And then they just hit them from history. The last skeleton taken from the burial ground was a gigantic one, measuring 7 feet in length. The femur alone would have proved that the skeleton was that of a giant, and the pelvic bone twice as large as those of an ordinary man. The grinding skull of the giant had a perfect set of teeth, not one cracked or decayed, and with enamel as beautiful as polished marble. The bones were perfect in every detail, notwithstanding the fact that they must have interred here for centuries. The entire absence of vegetable matter in the soil and the perfect drainage would account for the preservation of the bony structure. Of the whole number of skeletons thus far found, only 2 indicate immature development, the remainder representing the framework of a race of men evidently extinct for centuries. This is certainly the first discovery of skeletons in which the characteristic development of giants has been observed. It is thought by local scientists that these bones belong to a tribe of aborigines, but this theory cannot be fully established by the material structure of the skeleton. Although no implements or ornaments were found buried with the bones, yet in close proximity many instruments of warfare and domestic utensils were found. They are mostly composed of stone, though some are composed of copper, and a few of shell and bone. The stone implements are flint spears and arrowheads, and appear to be wrought with exceeding great skill. Pottery is found in great abundance. For many years, specimens of these pots have been unearthed in this region, especially along the banks of the creek. None of these skeletons was found in a separate grave, they being for the most part piled together in one conglomerate mass. 10 were found in one place in close contact, facing the setting sun, and arranged in a sitting posture. Many of the bones found farther down the bank and in a soil in which there was more vegetable matter crumbled to a dust as soon as exposed to the atmosphere, and the symmetry of a single bone could not be distinguished. Many traditions have been brought out since the discovery. One old settler has called to mind the fact that 50 years ago a tree was uprooted on this same spot, exposing 3 skeletons of gigantic dimensions. And as they were beneath the trees, it must have sprung up long before the bodies were buried. General Lew Wallace says he remembers the sections of a stranger who several years ago spent many months digging along the banks of Sugar Creek in search of a gold spoon supposed to have been buried long ago when this part of the country was inhabited by savage tribes. Dodge the hijack. And the owner of the land on which these remains were found calls to mind a tradition often related by his grandfather that a Spanish treasure had been buried here in the long, long ago, when the country was a wilderness and a Chicago of barren wastes, of impenetrable swamps. The excavations are being continued, and it is thought that rich developments are in prospect. For there is not a foot of the soil removed that does not contain some relic or grinding skull. All right? Skulls, bones, everything. Archaeological artifacts all over the place. Continue, it says here, Noble County. Burial mounds located on Section 2, Elkhart Township. 2 smaller mounds are also visible at this site. All right, that's from his other book. History of the counties of Whitley. Sorry, guys. So history of the counties of Whitley and Noble County, Indiana, 1882, Noble County. On Section 2, Elkhart Township, on what is called Sanford's Point, there are several mounds, one of which was opened some 8 or 10 years ago by the neighbors who expected to unearth some valuable trinkets. Quite a number of bones were found, and these were scattered around on the surface of the ground, where they were left. No trinkets were found. An inferior maxillary bone found and said to have been remarkably large and sound. Now, this picture here says this burial mound is located east of the last mound that was a part of the large cluster of burials that extended around Tamarack Lake. Alvort's History of Noble County, Indiana. All right, so these are the sources I'm naming out, right, when I'm reading these bold black letters. A big Indian. Of the interesting collection of Dr. Eagle's possession, the most prominent were the entire skull, dorsal and lumbar vertebra, pelvic bones, and left femur and forearm of a skeleton exhumed from one of the prehistoric mounds of Noble County, located on the farm of Jeremiah Noel, Section 1, Elkhart Township. Some measurements were taken, which are given below, with the common names of the measured parts: skull from base to nose over the top of the head to the base of the occipital, 11.5 inches. Around the skull from the middle of the forehead, 15.74 inches. Over the top from ear to ear, 10.75 inches. Thigh bone, 18 inches long, large and shown by the size of the muscular attachments, great solidity and power of muscle. Forearm, 12 inches, large and strong. This skull in size and proportion was superior to those of many whites, and the pelvis, backbone, and thigh bone all indicated that the form, when clothed in flesh and animated by the living spirit, must have been a noble specimen of manhood. The cranial development showed the capability of a high degree of intellectual culture. The skeleton just described was found in a large mound on the Knowles farm, as above stated, with parts of 27 others by explorers in the interest of Balti and Company, publishers of the history of LaGrange and Noble counties, in describing the excavation of this mound and others in the same vicinity. The principal writer of that history notes the posture of the skeletons as identical with known modes of Indian burials, and alluding to the fact of a remarkably large and sound maxillary bone, indicating comparatively recent burials, adds, the reader must remember that these are bones of the mound builders, not Indians. That's the hijack. Get what they're trying to say, right? Not the people they're calling, today, what we picture. Continue, says here, Journal Gazette, July 16th, 1912. Mound builders' bones. Skeleton of a giant unearthed in Indiana by workmen. Relics of a prehistoric age are being brought to light in Noble County. The find is in York Township, where workmen excavating for a public highway found the skeleton of an inhabitant of early days. The bones indicate that the person was fully 9 feet tall, all right? A 9-footer, again, 9 feet tall. The bones are unusually large, and the position of the skeleton, when found, indicated that the body had been interred in a sitting position. The belief is advanced that the remains are those of a mound builder. Other discoveries in the same neighborhood indicate that York Township was inhabited years before the red man set foot on Hoosier soil. Noble County is believed to have been the burial place of a large number of mound builders. All right. Continuing, says here, Artisans and Artifacts of Vanished Races by Theophilus L. Dickerson, 1915. Some workmen, while digging in a piece of hilly woodland, discovered a curiously shaped stone that extended about 4 feet below the surface and bearing strange hieroglyphic characters. Curiosity prompted the workmen to remove this stone cover from the vault, which was found to be circular in shape. The stone cover was 6 inches in thickness. In the stone grave was the remains of a skeleton approximating the stature of a giant, and in primitive times, no doubt, he occupied a commanding position. judging from the care that had been given in building a stone sepulture and the metal and stone ornaments found about this prehistoric human skeleton. The copper ornaments of this aboriginal giant almost covered the skeleton. The characters on the stone cover resembled the phonetic or queer hieroglyphic symbols on stones of Aztec ruins in Mexico, Central America, and Yucatan. This burial vault was similar to our modern cisterns, jug form, with the stone cover on top. It says here, continuing Pike County. And this article says Mound near Petersburg has interest in history. And this is from the History of Pike and Dubois Counties of Indiana, 1885. John Stuckley, Mr. Auburn, and few others whose names are forgotten were digging a grave on top of a mound near Sipples, and reaching the depth of about 3 feet came upon the remains of 3 persons. The first was a huge being, the lower maxillary being large enough to pass over that of a living person, flesh and all. Mr. Stuckley further says that the femur bone was several inches longer than that of an ordinary man. Unfortunately, these remains have been neglected and lost. All right, Smithsonian. Of the remains of the other 2, one seemed to have been a woman, the other a child. The skeleton of the woman was reclining between the legs of the huge man, and the child between those of the woman. Other skeletons have been found, usually with a stone resting under the head and one on the heart. Unfortunately, no extensive scientific examination has ever been made in these mounds. Doubtless, they would richly repay the archaeologist for his pains. Going into Porter County, and again, we're in Indiana. It says burial mounds at Bone Grove in Porter County, Indiana. That's the image they got there of the mound. It says Maysville, Kentucky Herald from June 3rd, 1895. Giant skeleton unearthed, Valparaiso, Indiana. While the steam shovels on the Knickerbocker Sand Company were loading sand at Dune Park on the shore of Lake Michigan, they unearthed a well-preserved skeleton 7 feet 2 inches in length, and is supposed to be that of a member of an early tribe of Indians. It was found nearly 30 feet underground. Continuing, Pulaski County, Indiana Geological Report, 16th Annual, 1885. Pulaski County, Indiana. An Indian Creek Township at a point opposite Pulaski Mills in the bottom or alluvial of the Tippecanoe is a large mound about 100 feet in diameter at the base, and which was before being plowed over fully 12 feet high. Many years ago, an excavation was made in the mound by a minister then sojourning in the neighborhood, with the result of unearthing several crumbling human skeletons. The bones were reported to have been very large and strong, but yielded to the action of the air and crumbled to dust. Randolph County. Here's another image. Mounds and embankments of an old fort near Winchester. According to locals, a 7-foot female skeleton was removed from the burial mound inside of the embankments of this enclosure. Okay, and that's the image. Continues, says History of Randolph County, Indiana by E. Tucker, 1882. There are many antiquities in Randolph County, mounds, embankments, etc., some of which are described. Be one of the best known is to be seen partly in the fairgrounds northwest of Winchester. It is an enclosure of 43 acres in the form of an exact square. The embankment was from 7 to 10 feet wide, as also having a mound in the center of the area 15 feet high. The whole enclosure and the embankment also, when found by the first settlers, was covered with large forest trees exactly like the adjacent regions. The eastern opening was unprotected. The western one was surrounded outwardly by an embankment shaped like a horseshoe open toward the gate, joined on the north side to the embankment, but left open on the south side of the gate for a passage to the outer grounds. The embankment has been considerably lowered throughout the greater portion of its extent by cultivation, by the passage of highways, etc., but it is still several feet high, and is very plainly traceable along its entire extent. Some of the bank of the south side toward the southeast corner still remains as it existed at the first settlement of the country. That part is now some 6 feet high, and perhaps 25 feet wide. A large portion of the eastern bank has lately been dug away for the purpose of brick making, and it is said that charcoal is found scattered throughout the mass of clay composing the embankment. On the side of the creek, not very far distant, were gravel banks containing great quantities of human bones, which are said to have been hauled away by wagon loads. These skeletons were many of them large, but bones were much decayed and crumbled readily when disturbed and brought out to the air. Continuing, history of Randolph County, Indiana, 1885. In a gravel bank on the west side of the White River, west of Mount Zion Church, near Nathan Butts, were found several skeletons, and with nearly everyone, coals of fire seemed to have been thrown in. They were 3 or 4 feet below the surface, lying horizontally and mostly large. The teeth were solid, though some were worn. Continuing, Rush County. Centennial history of Rush County, Indiana, 1921. Centennial history, 4 years ago, there was such a mound explored on the old Gary farm, also in Posey Township, and in that were disclosed numerous bits of pottery, a considerable quantity of beads of a variegated sort, and the skeletons of a gigantic man. Continuing, Shelby County. The Anderson Intelligencer, September 6, 1885. Giant skeletons. Shelbyville, Indiana, August 19th. George Arnold, a farmhand in the employ of Franklin Boots, who lived about 50 miles west of the city, made a discovery which has excited widespread interest in the county. The object of the interest is the skeleton of what was once a man of gigantic proportions, which was uncovered in a gravel pit on Mr. Boots' farm. The skeleton was found in a sitting posture, facing east and about 6 feet under the surface. Some of the bones were badly broken by a cave-in of the bank, but the skull and some of the larger bones were taken out intact, and from them may be easily realized the gigantic stature of the being of whom they once gave support. A measurement of the skull from front to back or rear, the rule passing through the eye socket to the back of the head, shows it to have been about 16 inches, while the breadth of the inferior maxillary was 8 1/2 inches, showing that the brain must have weighed 4.5 to 5 pounds. Careful measurements of the other bones established the fact that the man, when alive, was not less than 9 feet in height. All right, he had to be at least 9 feet in height, guys, and in large proportions. From the appearance of the teeth, which are very large and do not show the slightest sign of decay, although they are worn almost the bones of the jaw. Okay, 9-footers. I don't see any 9-footers in the NBA. I do see 7-footers though, right? St. John's Herald, St. John's, Arizona, November 24th, 1892. Another skeleton of a 7-foot aboriginal giant has been unearthed at Sugar Creek, Indiana. The teeth and the grinding skull are perfect. Continuing, St. Joseph County, Indiana History Bulletin, Volume 3, October 1925. In the South Bend Tribune of October 4th contains the announcement of the discovery of important prehistoric remains in St. Joseph County. This announcement is confirmed by a letter from John D. Hibbard, Secretary of the Northern Indiana Historical Society. The circumstances are as follows. Carl Litchfield of Tea Garden and Jesse Litchfield, who lives just north of Tea Garden, recently excavated a mound on the farm of Grove Vosburg, some 3 miles north of Walkerton. The mound reputed to be of a great antiquity, and this seems to be confirmed by the memory of the farm. The mound was at one time 25 feet high, but in recent years its height has been decreased. At a depth of 12 feet, the Litchfields found 8 skeletons buried in the arrangement, somewhat like the spokes of a wheel, with their heads towards the center. In the skull of one of the skeletons, said to be of a large man, a fine flamed arrow was embedded. With this same skeleton, several pieces of copper were found. The excavation also brought to light a number of other articles, bands, beads, etc., and 2 pipe bowls, one smooth, the other elaborately carved. Continuing, we're in Stark County, Crawfordsville, Crawfordsville, Indiana, November 9th, 1875. The Stark County Ledger states that a mound near Knox, which was recently been opened, contains several skeletons of human beings who were once of great stature. It is estimated that they must have been some 7 or 8 feet tall while living, 8-feeter, right? 8 feet tall. Among the other interesting things discovered were several copper arrowheads. Vermilion County, History of Park and Vermilion Counties, Indiana, 1913, Vermilion County. In March 1880, While a company of gravel road workers were excavating gravel from the bank on the ridge at the southwest corner of the Newport Fairgrounds, 5 human skeletons were found. In the gravel bank along the railroad at the southeast corner of the fairground, another skeleton was found. No implements of war were found with the bones, but ashes were perceivable. A collection of dozen skeletons shows by measurements of the thigh bone found that the warriors, including a few women, averaged over 6 feet and 2 inches in height. The hunters forming the attachment of muscles showed that they were not only a race of giant stature, but also of more than giant strength. Vigo County, Davenport Morning Tribune, February 5, 1889. Many skeletons of an extinct Indian race unearthed in Indiana. Whitlock, Indiana, February 4th. A huge gravel pit was opened here recently. Soon after the excavating began, a skeleton was found, and as the pit widened, other skeletons were until at last 30 graves had been opened and many skeletons brought to light. Evidently the remains of an Indian tribe, the Shawnees, probably, who had the villages in this region. One skeleton was found beneath the large stump, and yesterday another was found 12 feet underground. The graves appear in regular order, and the occupants were buried in a sitting posture. In one grave, 3 skeletons supposed to be those of a woman and 2 children were found. Yesterday, the largest specimen was unearthed, the body of a person who in life must have been a giant. A peculiarity of the skeletons is that of the teeth are nearly all in perfect state of preservation, and one grave beside the human skeletons was that of a dog, a copper spearhead, all right, a dog being buried like Anubis, right, an earthen pot, and numerous beads, proving that some important personage had been put to rest there. The city of the dead is undoubtedly 150 years old. Continue on to Wayne County. Hey, much love, Groove Controls. Appreciate the donation. Appreciate you. Appreciate you, Keith. All right. Lumbee, probably, Wakama, all these people. Hey, you saw the video, right? Wayne County. Sun temples or henges located north of Cambridge City and Wayne County, aligned to the summer solstice and equinox sunrise. Perrysburg Journal, December 24, 1892. John Beale, while excavating at Richmond, Indiana, penetrated a grave of human skulls and bones. The skulls are of a gigantic size and by measurement are thought to have belonged to persons 8 feet tall. 8 feet tall. Janesville Daily Gazette, Janesville, Wisconsin, November 4th, 1902. Unearthed big skeleton. Dublin, Indiana, November 4th. While blasting stumps on the farm of Andrew Kiesling near Cadiz, workmen unearthed the skeleton of a huge man. The rings on the stump indicated the age to be 200 years, but it appears evident that the bones have been buried for a longer period. And here's an image that says here, despite being plowed for many years, the Wayne County henge is still visible. Right, they building stuff over this now. I mean, they're planting, right? All right, so we move on. Continue on the book. Again, the Encyclopedia of Ancient Giants in North America. And we're going into West Virginia section of this book. So again, we've gone over many different states already if you missed the previous episodes. So in West Virginia, we have here early picture of the Moundsville, West Virginia burial mound. The trench from the excavation of the mound is visible on the left. The mound was originally surrounded by a moat and earthwork. That's a pretty cool picture right here. Look at that. I find so many things like that here in Costa Rica, that they don't consider mounds, right? Barber County. Again, we're in West Virginia. Fort Wayne Journal Gazette, April 5th, 1933. Giant skeleton found in a riverbank, tomahawk at his side with a tomahawk. Brownstown, West Virginia, April 5th. A remarkable discovery was made by Harry Berry, a teamster near the wharf landing. A recent flood had washed away a portion of the bank at that point and exposed to view the skeleton, which when dug out of the bank was found to be of enormous size. The skeleton was evidently that of an Indian. A pipe and a tomahawk were found by his side. The skeleton is in a fair state of preservation and is 14 feet in length. Guys, hear that? Did he just say 14 feet in length? A giant Indian with a pipe and a tomahawk. Must have been a pretty big pipe for him and a pretty large tomahawk, huh? 14-footer. Come on, man. The skull, jaws, and the teeth of the red man were well preserved. Wow, a 14-footer. Brooke County, History of the Panhandle, West Virginia, 1879, an ancient sepulcher. In the summer of 1834, one Samuel Cummins, an enterprising stonemason of Steubenville, Ohio, one day crossed the river to prospect along the ledge of rocks that lined the hills on the West Virginia side of a suitable place to quarry stone. And looking about, he discovered a massive rock that in some previous age of the world had fallen from the overhanging cliffs above. While making an examination with a view of quarrying it, he discovered an ancient stone wall built against one side, an ancient stone wall, but almost hid from view by the accumulated rubbish of ages. Curiosity led him to throw this wall down, when an opening appeared in the rock a few feet from him that disclosed a large cavern or vault scooped out of the underside of the rock, which upon closer inspection he found to contain a large number of human skeletons, packed together in perfect regularity. Visitors estimated the number at 75 to 100. You guys hear that? How many skeletons are being found here? At this time of this discovery, the proprietor of the land, Colonel Nathaniel Wells, lived several miles distant and did not hear of it for several days. In the meantime, in the absence of anyone with authority to protect the place, visitors thronged to it by the hundreds, each one carrying away prominent portions of the remains till they were scattered, as it were to the winds. Thus were the remains of the dead of a prehistoric race dragged from the long repose of ages and ruthlessly destroyed to gratify the idle curiosity of the ignorant and thoughtless. The vault is located on the West Virginia side of the Ohio River, nearly opposite South Street and Steubenville, about 100 rods below Mr. Wells Ferry landing, and a few east of the Pittsburgh, Wheeling, and Kentucky Railroad. All right, you guys hear that? Continues, says here, Cabell County, giant and ancient mound. Curious relics of prehistoric times is found in the tomb. And again, this is from the Washington Post from June 23rd, 1908. Giant and ancient mound, again, curious relics of prehistoric times are found in tomb. Huntington, West Virginia, June 22nd. The municipal authorities of Central City, 4 miles west of here, 3 weeks ago ordered the removal of a prehistoric mound from 13th Street. Today, 12 feet above the base of the mound, a gigantic human skeleton was discovered. It is almost 7 feet in length and of massive proportions. It was surrounded by a mass of rude trinkets. 8 huge copper bracelets were discovered. Thus, when burnished, proved to be of purest beaten copper and a perfect preservation. Rude stone vessels, hatchets, and arrowheads were found with the skeleton. A curiously inscribed totem was found at the head of the skeleton. The Smithsonian Institution will be notified of the discovery. No, don't do it. Don't tell the Smithsonian. This is why we never heard of these things, right? Because they grabbed them and hid it, right? Continuing on to Doddridge County. Charleston Gazette, June 15, 1930. Salem professor discovers huge skeletons and mounds. Dr. Sutton believes tribe of giants once inhabited Doddridge County section. Data on exploration will go to the Smithsonian Institution. Oh no, not again. You see why we never heard of these things, right? Salem, June 14th, excavation of 2 mounds near Morganville in Doddridge County, about 11 miles west of here, revealed what Professor Ernest Sutton, head of the history department of Salem College, believes is valuable evidence of a race of giants who inhabited this section of West Virginia more than 1,000 years ago. Professor Sutton revealed tonight that he had been excavating the 2 mounds for the past several months. Skeletons of 4 mound builders indicating they were from 7 to 9 feet tall have been uncovered. 9-footers again. Professor Sutton believes they were members of a race known in anthropology as Sioux Indians. The best preserved skeleton was found enclosed in a casting of clay. All the vertebrae and other bones except in the skulls were intact. Careful measurement of the specimen indicated it was a man 7.5 feet tall. Continuing, Kanawha County. And here's a map of a section of the numerous mounds and earthworks that once dominated the landscape of Charleston, West Virginia. Right? Once dominated. They're all gone. They've been destroyed. They've been plowed over. They've been farmed. They've been destroyed, guys. There was mounds all over North America. Right? Charleston was the capital city of the Allegheny Giants. Only a few of the 100 of mounds are still viewable around the city. That's from his other book. And here's a mound here, part of a cemetery. You see that? And they were even using it to bury people in the mound. Wow. Wow. Here we got 2 sun temples in Charleston that were aligned to the summer and winter solstice sunrise. The circumference of both circles was 6,666 feet. Remember that? We read that in the other book. In the middle was the large Smith Mound. History of Kanawha County, West Virginia, 1876. In this village, 3 cellars have been dug by the citizens, and in each case, an entire human skeleton was exhumed. A square of ground embracing about 10 acres in that portion of the village fronting the river seems to have been set apart for a cemetery. And digging every cellar and well, and even every post hole, greater or less numbers of human bones have been discovered. Earthenware of a superior quality has been dug up. Also bone necklaces, carved shells, bone fish hooks, and an image carved in stone have been taken from beneath the surface in this beautiful little village. Mr. Marshall Hansford, while digging a post hole in his yard a few years ago, found about 18 inches below the surface 9 pieces of sheet copper, several inches square and rolled very thin. In digging his cellar, he found the skeleton of a large-sized man and a great variety of bones of birds, bears, and other wild animals. As a proof that these skeletons, relics, and the like were remains of an ancient race, I need only to inform the reader that not long before these discoveries were made, the earth above them was literally covered with stalwart sycamores, which Mr. Hansford informed me were fully 500 years of age. There was a whole forest there, right over that. Wow, that's how much years had gone by, guys. It says here in this image, the Smith or Creel Mound is still visible in South Charleston. All right, that's still there because it was so big they couldn't take it down, or they probably did, huh? Made it a little smaller. 12th Annual Report of the Bureau of American Ethnology of the Smithsonian Institute, 1894. A large mound situated on the farm of Colonel B.H. Smith near Charleston is conical in form, about 175 feet in diameter at the base and 35 feet high. It appears to be double. That is to say, it consists of 2 mounds, one built on the other, the lower or original one 20 feet and upper 15 feet high. The exploration was made by sinking a shaft, 12 feet square at the top and narrowing gradually to 6 feet square at the bottom, down through the center of the structure to the original surface of the ground and short distance below it. After removing a slight covering of earth, an irregular mass of large, rough, flat sandstone, evidently brought from the bluffs half a mile distant, was countered. Some of these sandstones were a good load for 2 ordinary men. The removal of a wagon load or so of these stones brought to light a stone vault 7 feet long and 4 feet deep, in the bottom of which was found a large and much decayed human skeleton, but wanting the head, which the most careful examination failed to discover. A single rough spearhead was the only accompanying article found in this vault. At the depth of 6 feet in earth, similar to that around the base of the mound, was found a second skeleton, also much decayed, of an adult of ordinary size. At 9 feet, a third skeleton was encountered in a mass of loose, dry earth surrounded by the remains of a bark coffin. This was in a much better state of preservation than the other 2. The skull which was preserved is of the compressed or flathead type. For some 3 or 4 feet below this, the earth was found to be mixed with ashes. At this depth, this downward progress, Colonel Norris began to encounter the remains of what further excavations showed to have been a timber vault, about 12 feet square and 7 or 8 feet high. From the conditions in which the remains of the cover were found, he concludes that this must have been roof-shaped and, having become decayed, was crushed in by the weight of the addition made to the mound. Some of the walnut timbers of this vault were as much as 12 inches in diameter. In this vault were found 5 skeletons, one lying prostrate on the floor at the depth of 19 feet from the top of the mound, and 4 others which, from the positions in which they were found, were supposed to have been placed standing in the 4 corners. The first of these was discovered at the depth of 14 feet amid a commingled mass of earth and decaying bark and timbers, nearly erect, leaning against the wall, and surrounded by the remains of a bark coffin. All the bones except those of the left forearm were too far decayed to be saved. These were preserved by 2 heavy copper bracelets which yet surrounded them. The skeleton found lying in the middle of the floor of the vault was of unusual large size, measuring 7 feet 6 inches in length and 19 inches between the shoulder sockets. It had also been enclosed in a wrapping or coffin of bark, remains of which were still distinctly visible. It lay upon the back, head, each legs together, and arms by the sides. There were 6 heavy bracelets on each wrist. 4 others were found under the head, which together with a spear point of black flint were encased in a mass of mortar-like substance, which had evidently been wrapped in some textile fabric. On the breast was a copper gorget. In each hand were 3 spearheads of black flint, and others were about the head, knees, and feet. Near the right hand were 2 hematite celts, and on the shoulder were 3 large and thick plates of mica. About the shoulders, waist, and thighs were numerous minute perforated shells and shell beads. All right, we got this other image here. The burial mound in Dunbar was designated as Mound 31 by the Smithsonian Institute. 12th Annual Report of the Bureau of American Ethnology of the Smithsonian Institution, 1894. Mound 31 measured 318 feet in circumference, 25 feet high, and 40 feet across is a flat top. A 10-foot circular shaft was sunk from the top and trenches run from the side. The top layer consisted of 2 feet of soil, immediately below which was 1 foot of mixed clay and ashes. Below this to the bottom, and the mound was composed of earth, apparently largely mixed with ashes, placed in small deposits during a long period of time. 3 feet below the top were 2 skeletons, one above the other, extended at full length facing each other and in close contact. Above but near the heads were a pipe, celt, and some other arrow or spearheads. 10 feet below these were 2 very large skeletons in a sitting position, facing each other with their extended legs interlocked into the knees. Their hands outstretched and slightly elevated were placed in a sustaining position to a hemispherical, hollowed, coarse-grained sandstone, burned until red and brittle. This was about 2 feet across the top, and the cavity or depression was filled with white ashes containing fragments of bones burned almost to coals. Over it was placed a somewhat wider slab of limestone 3 inches thick. Continues, says here, Bureau of Ethnology, 5th Annual Report, 1883-84, South Charleston, West Virginia. Below the center of number 7, C plate, sunk into the original earth, was a vault about 8 feet long, 3 feet wide, and 3 feet deep, lying extended on the back and bottom of this. Amid the rotten fragments of a bark coffin was decayed human skeleton, fully 7 feet long, with head west. No evidence of fire was to be seen, nor were any stone implements discovered, but lying in a circle just above the hips were 50 circular pieces of white perforated shell, each about 1 inch in diameter and 1/8 of an inch thick. Continuing, the 12th Annual Report of the Bureau of American Ethnology of the Smithsonian Institution, 1894, says here Kanawha County. Number 11 is now 35 by 40 feet at the base and 4 feet high. In the center, 3 feet below the surface, was a vault 8 feet long and 3 feet wide. In the bottom of this, among the decayed fragments of bark wrappings, lay a skeleton fully 7 feet long, extended at full length on the back, head west. Lying in a circle above the hips were 52 perforated shell discs about 1 inch in diameter and 1/8 of an inch thick. Continuing, says here, 12th Annual Report of the Bureau of American Ethnology of the Smithsonian Institute, 1894, Kanawha County. Mound 19, the one farthest to the east, is 60 feet in diameter and 5 feet high. It was found to contain a rude vault of angular stones, some of them as much as 2 men could lift. This had been built on the natural surface and was 8 feet long, 4 feet wide, and 3 high, but contained only the decaying fragments of a large skeleton and a few fragments of pottery. Continuing, 12th Annual Report of the Bureau of American Ethnology of the Smithsonian Institute, 1894, Kanawha County, West Virginia still. At the depth of 14 feet, a rather large human skeleton was found, which was in a partially upright position with the back against a hard clay wall. All the bones were badly decayed, except those of the left wrist, which had been preserved by 2 heavy copper bracelets. 19 feet from the top, the bottom of this debris was reached, where in the remains of a bark coffin, a skeleton measuring 7.5 feet in length and 19 inches across the shoulders was discovered. Each wrist had encircled by 6 heavy copper bracelets. Springfield Globe Republic, February 2nd, 1886. 2 human skeletons found. Charleston, West Virginia, February 2nd. News has just been received from Winfield, Putnam County of the strange discovery of 2 human skeletons lying on a floating cake of ice in the Kanawha River near Red House Shoals Sunday. The skeletons were in a good state of preservation and were evidently the frames of large men. Some fragments of clothing surrounded the bones, but nothing to indicate it in any degree the identity of the deceased or the locality from whence they floated on the ice. Wow. Continuing, says here, West Virginia Geological Survey, Kanawha County, 1914. Below the center of number 7, sunk into the original earth, was a vault about 8 feet long, 3 feet wide, and 3 feet deep, lying extended on the back in the bottom of this. Amid the rotted fragments of a bark coffin was a decayed human skeleton, fully 7 feet long, with head west. No evidence of R was to be seen, nor were any stone implements discovered. But lying in a circle just above the hips were 50 circular pieces of white perforated shells, each about 1 inch in diameter and 1/8 of an inch thick. The bones of the left arm lay by the side of the body, but those of the right arm, as in one of the mounds heretofore mentioned, were stretched at right angles of the body, reaching out to a small oven-shaped vault, the mortar or cement roof of which still unbroken. The capacity of this small circular vault was probably 2 bushels, and the peculiar appearance of the dark-colored deposit therein and other indications led to the belief that it had been filled with corn, maize, right, in the ear. The absence of weapons would indicate that the individual buried here was not a warrior, though a person of some importance. Continuing, it says here, West Virginia's Historical Magazine, Volume 2, 1902, a giant axe. Charleston, West Virginia, March 17, 1902. Dr. Mr. Ladley, some years ago when Colonel Ben Smith Mound was opened by Professor Norris of the Smithsonian, he found the skeleton of a giant which measured 7 feet 8 inches in length. This occurred about 15 years ago. Now comes the sequel. A few days ago, Joe Pfister was plowing near the mound and unearthed a stone axe. The axe is of a granite, beautifully made and well preserved. It weighs 7 pounds, 8 ounces, the largest ever found here. Dr. J. 9 Mahan brought this axe and has it in his possession. Could this have been the giant's axe? Can you get some of your correspondents to give an article on Indian axes? Very truly yours, Robert Douglas Roller. Continuing, says here, the WPA Guide to West Virginia, 1935. In Stanton Park, a triangular park near the western end of town, is a conical Indian mound, 175 feet in circumference at the base and 30 feet high. Ornaments, stone weapons, fragments of pottery, and 14 human skeletons, and more than 7 feet long, were found when the mound was opened by the federal government in 1983. Lincoln County, Arizona Republic, February 27, 1892. They were giant in those days. Wheeling, West Virginia. While digging a grave on Trades Fork, Lincoln County, a few days ago, the bones of a human being of gigantic stature and the proportions were exhumed. The skeleton is in a good state of preservation, and the outlines of the frame sufficiently defined to determine that the stature of the person must have been 9 or 10 feet, okay? 9 or 10 feet tall. Guys hearing? The skull and other bones also indicate prodigious size. No one living has any knowledge of the grave or its occupant, and all indications point to its belonging to some prehistoric race of giants, contemporary with the mastodons, fossil remains of which have been found in many parts of the country. Marion County, History and Progress of the County of Marion, West Virginia, 1880. Look, so again, these bold black letters are the sources. Some years ago, some workmen, in preparing to build a bridge which spans Paw Paw Creek at the upper end of the village of Rhinesville, unearthed 3 skeletons, which were those of giants, each measuring over 7 feet in length. Continuing, Raleigh Herald, December 15th, 1916. Workmen last Tuesday, while grading for the Fairmount and Wyatt Railroad on the B.W. Cheyenne Farm near Pine Bluff, Marion County, unearthed the skeleton of what appears to be a giant of olden times. The skeleton was found in the mound opposite the residence of B.W. Bogues or Boogies. The skull and several of the larger bones were in a good state of preservation, the skull being something near the size of a 2-gallon bucket. You hear that? With a low forehead and a long underjaw. The ribs, so far as can be determined, appeared to be about 3 times the size of that of an average man of present time. That was a pretty big one right here too. One thigh bone, which is well preserved, measures 4.5 feet in length, which shows this person was of great height. Small bones, which appear to be those of the hands and fingers, would indicate hands of enormous size. The feet appear to be in proportion with other parts of the body. There has been quite a little speculation as to what that old mound contained, but up to the time the railroad commenced cutting it open, no one had the nerve to open it. Some citizens of that section claimed that it was just an ordinary mound, just as is found in so many places in Ohio, Indiana, and numerous other states, built by the mound builders. But now the mound has been opened, and nothing found but a single skeleton. All have come to the conclusion that the mound was nothing more than the grave of the giant, who must have been king of his tribe. The Smithsonian Institution will be notified of the discovery. Oh no! They gave it to the Smithsonian. Don't tell them! Don't tell them! We got an image right here. Prehistoric Hold Fort. Says here, now and long ago history of Marion County, West Virginia, 1969. The history of these people of mystery, scarce as it is in our valley, exists only in remnants of certain of their works, fragments of a stone and muscle road, which was devised, graded, and macadamized in most distant times, perhaps 2,000 years ago, and in certain clues of earth, which enabled the first known civilized visitors here to see and examine where once strange a fort had been. Evidence of these ancients was partially destroyed by the settlers' plow, yet certainly some evidence of these works remain. The most important site of prehistoric events in the present Marion County are the location of the ancient earthen fort at near Holt and that of the stone muscle shell road on the east bank of the Monongahela between the mouth of the Tigard Valley River and Little Creek at Catawba. Here by the Monongahela, on the Great Flats and the high hills, must have been a center of considerable activity 1,000 or so years ago and before. The ancient fort here on the largest flat was said to have occupied about 7 acres. Beneath it, along the river, lay the road, said to have been about 9 feet wide and 14 inches thick, composed of knapped stone, set in mortar and crushed muscle shells. The fort and this road were not products of people's imagination. Indeed, no. Evidence of their existence is well founded. Description of the ancient fort. There was an embankment on the flat about 10 feet high. It could have been 5 feet higher when it was heaped up, for it was easy to see it had settled. It was shaped something like a human head in a side view and enclosed about 7 acres. Places in it were open, like it had been tunneled out to begin with. There wasn't a rock in it, I heard. The dirt was layered black about 6 inches, then layered in natural color about 6 inches. At the bottom of and all along were a great sediment of mussel shells, where beads and arrow points and good many human bones were found. Description of the mounds inside the fort. W.B. Price told Reverend Henry Morgan that he had talked with many persons who remembered the mounds inside of the fort. For one, Stephen Morgan told him about them. He said there were 3 of them, about 10 feet high and 20 feet across the bottom, running up to a peak. Human bones were found in them and buried where the Holt graveyard is now. He described the mounds as just earth heaped on top of mussel shells. Description of the road. Price remembered seeing parts of the prehistoric road and said it was made of small broken stones and mussel shell mortar. You guys hearing this? A prehistoric road. Some places it was fairly solid, he said, but mostly it came apart when it was uncovered and rained on. The road was pretty much destroyed when grading was done for the FM&P Railroad. John Prickett's account of the road, it left the river where the path leaves it now and came over the bridge and went down the river to Newport, Catawba, where it ended. The stone muscle road was always said to end at a little creek. It was the opinion of 23 people interviewed that it had begun just below the mouth of the Tigard Valley River and had ended up at a little creek, and that except for about half a mile on the Prickett land, it followed the east bank of the river, very near the water, from the beginning to end, and that almost all of it that had not been destroyed when FM&P Railroad was constructed had come underwater when the first logs were built. And it says here, giant skeletons unearthed near the road and fort. So this is all in the same area, right? Mrs. Shearer told Adam O'Heck that Schoolmaster John Beale settled here a very long time ago, and she remembered him clearly, and that when he first came here to live, he found 4 human skeletons where Palatine is now, that people suppose had been washed from their graves by floods, the graves being near the river. She said she had heard that these skeletons were every one 8 feet long, 8 feet long, and that John Beale had measured them before digging a grave and reburying them. She also said that 3 such skeletons were found at the mouth of Pawpaw Creek many years later. Jim Dean and some men were digging for a bridge foundation and found these bones by the lower end of the old Buffalo Wallow. All right, she thought it was Dr. Kidwell, a Fairmount, who examined them and said they were very old, perhaps thousands of years old. Squire Satterfield had buried them in the Jolly graveyard in Rivesville. All of these skeletons, she said, were measured and found to be 8 feet long. Again, 8 feet long. 8 feet long. And unfortunately, guys, I know you're probably not going to like this. We've been here about an hour and 7 minutes. I actually wanted to make these videos a little shorter so people can be interested in sitting through them. You know, we got a lot of new people to get interested in the Giants videos, guys. I wanted to make it short, but I promise we're going to get right back into the book and finish it. You know, it's also Friday. I got a couple things to do, but I wanted to definitely drop a video today and get back into the Giant reading. I hope you guys enjoyed the little bit of reading we did today. I know it was short, but make sure you caught up to all my videos, you know, because they're giving me trouble with the Wallace Fard video, guys. They're giving me trouble. They're trying to say, they're trying to restrict it and give me, and trying to take it down. I'm disputing it right now. It must have been somebody from the NOI, Nation of Islam, that reported or got mad and tried to, you know, take the video down. But don't worry about that. Most likely we're going to win the dispute. There's nothing bad in them. You know, I'm just reading books. Make sure to check the first 2 parts out. It's going to get very interesting. I hope you like the readings on that as well. Again, guys, I have this book right here that we were just reading, the Encyclopedia of Ancient Giants in North America. My daughter helped me scan it, and I have it available in my Patreon page. If you guys are interested in owning this book in PDF form, you can download it from there. And again, I have the playlist, Giants of Ancient America, for all the previous episodes and all the different videos I've done on giants, okay? So make sure to catch up if you're new. If you like what I was reading today, you know, we've read a lot of it and we've gone over other books too. And I apologize if it was too quick for you. I know, but I have to go, and we want to make these short for people to sit through them. People complain about my long videos, guys, still. You know, I got a lot of new people that are used to, you know, other YouTubers making 10-minute, 20-minute videos, hyping everybody up, and that's it, with fancy music and images popping out everywhere, you know. But we try to do very thorough investigations here and research. You know, a lot of my videos are pretty long, but, you know, hopefully we can get people to like get used to that and watch the other longer videos, you know. But I appreciate everybody that was here in the live. Thank you for coming through. Thank you. You know, I'll give you your Friday evening back. Shabbat Shalom. Appreciate everybody, all the support. Again, check out the videos I dropped in the last 2 days if you haven't. I dropped 2 really good videos, guys, in the last 2 days. We're going to continue that series. We're going to have part 3 coming out soon. And we got a lot more videos planned, a lot more investigations that we're going to put together. All right? Yeah, America, or North America specifically, land of the giants. The land of the giants, right? 7-footers to 14-footers. You guys heard that, right? A 14-footer, 10-footers, 9-footers, 8-footers. Man, giants everywhere. Yeah. Much love and respect. I'm gonna go do a little soccer scrimmage. I'll be honest with you, and it starts soon, so I gotta go. We're gonna, you know, gotta keep the health and the exercise. I gotta stay young, you know. Thank you for tuning in, though. I appreciate you guys. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Pura vida. Wow.